A bicycle helmet is designed to attenuate impacts to the head of a cyclist in falls while minimizing side effects such as interference with peripheral vision. There is ongoing scientific research into the degree of protection offered by bicycle helmets in the event of an accident, and on the effects of helmet wearing on cyclist and motor vehicle driver behavior. There is active debate over what can be concluded from available studies, and on whether the use of helmets by cyclists should be promoted or mandated, either just for children or for cyclists of all ages. In particular, the debate over bicycle helmet laws is intense and occasionally bitter, often based not only on differing interpretations of the scientific and other academic literature, but also in differing assumptions and interests of various parties. About helmets. History of designs. A cycle helmet should generally be light in weight and provide ample ventilation, because cycling can be an intense aerobic activity which significantly raises body temperature, and the head in particular needs to be able to regulate its temperature. The dominant form of helmet up to the 1970s was the leather hairnet style. This offered acceptable protection from scrapes and cuts, but only minimal impact protection, and was mainly used by racing cyclists. More widespread use of helmets began in the US in the 1970s, after many decades when bicycles were regarded only as children's toys. Many American adults took up cycling during and after the bike boom of the 1970s. Two of the first modern bicycle helmets were made by MSR, a manufacturer of mountaineering equipment, and Bell Sports, a manufacturer of helmets for auto racing and motorcycles. These helmets were a spin-off from the development of expanded polystyrene foam liners for motorcycling and motorsport helmets, and had hard polycarbonate plastic shells. The bicycle helmet arm of Bell was split off in 1991 as Bell Sports Inc., having completely overtaken the motorcycle and motorsports helmet business. The first commercially successful purpose-designed bicycle helmet was the Bell Biker, a polystyrene-lined hard shell released in 1975. At the time there was no appropriate standard. The only applicable one, from Snell, would be passed only by a light open-face motorcycle helmet. Over time the design was refined, and by 1983 Bell were making the V1 Pro, the first polystyrene helmet intended for racing use. In 1984 Bell produced the LIL Bell Shell, a no-shell children's helmet. These early helmets had little ventilation. In 1985, Snell B85 was introduced, the first widely adopted standard for bicycle helmets. This has subsequently been refined into B90 and B95. At this time helmets were almost all either hard shell or no shell. Ventilation was still minimal due mainly to technical limitations of the foams and shells in use. Around 1990, a new construction technique was invented, in-mold microshell. A very thin shell was incorporated during the molding process. This rapidly became the dominant technology, allowing for larger vents and more complex shapes than hard shells. Use of hard shells declined rapidly among the general cyclist population during the 1990s, almost disappearing by the end of the decade, but remained popular with BMX riders as well as inline skaters and skateboarders. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw advances in retention and fitting systems, with cradles which adjust precisely to the rider's head, replacing the old system of varying thickness pads. This has also resulted in the back of the head being less covered by the helmet. Impacts to this region are rare, but it does make a modern bike helmet much less suitable for activities such as unicycling, skateboarding and inline skating, where falling over backward is relatively common. Other helmets will be more suitable for these activities, since more advanced helmets began being used in the Tour de France. Carbon fiber inserts are often used to increase strength and protection of the helmet. The Gyro Atmos and Ionos, as well as the Bell Ultra, were among the first to use carbon fiber. Some modern racing bicycle helmets have a long tapering back end for streamlining. This type of helmet is mainly dedicated to time trial racing, as they lack significant ventilation, making them uncomfortable for long races. History of standards in the United States. The Snell Memorial Foundation, an organization initially established to create standards for motorcycle and auto racing helmets, implemented one of the first standards. Since updated, Snell's standard includes testing of random samples. In 1990, the Consumers Association market survey showed that around 90% of helmets on sale were Snell B90 certified. By the 1998 survey, the number of Snell certified helmets was around 0. There are two main types of helmet: hard shell and soft microshell. Hard shells declined rapidly among the general cyclist population over this period, almost disappearing by the end of the decade, but remained more popular with BMX riders as well as inline skaters and skateboarders. The American National Standards Institute created a standard called ANSI Z80.4 in 1984. Later, the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission created its own mandatory standard for all bicycle helmets sold in the United States, which took effect in March 1999. In the European Union, the currently applicable standards are N 1078 to 1997 and N 1080 to 1997. In Australia and New Zealand, the current legally required standard is as NZS 2063. A 2004 report concluded that the performance requirements of the 1996 version of this standard was slightly less strict than the Snell B95 standard, but incorporated a quality assurance requirement, making it arguably safer. Design intentions and standards. The standards are intended to reduce acceleration to the head due to impact, as a stiff liner made of expanded polystyrene is crushed against the head. However, both the CPSC and the N1078 standards only look at linear accelerations and ignore rotational accelerations. The rotational accelerations that arise in bicycle accidents can be large enough to cause concussions, diffuse axonal injury and subdural hematoma. A few new helmets are designed to reduce rotational accelerations in accidents. It is important that a helmet fit the cyclist properly. In one study of children and adolescents aged 4 to 18 years, 96% were found to be incorrectly fitted. Efficacy of incorrectly fitted helmets is reckoned to be much lower. One estimate states that risk is increased almost twofold. The Snell Memorial Foundation recommends that any helmet that has sustained a substantial blow should be discarded and replaced, including any helmet involved in a crash in which the head has hit a hard surface or in which a fall has resulted in marks on the shell, because some helmet materials deteriorate with age. The Snell Memorial Foundation recommends that a helmet be replaced at least every 5 years, or sooner if the manufacturer recommends it. In 2015, several manufacturers were making or seeking financing to make folding helmets in various designs. History of use. Helmets use varies greatly between populations and between groups. Downhill mountain bikers and amateur sportive cyclists normally wear helmets, and helmet use is enforced in professional cycle sport and in a few legal jurisdictions. Utility cyclists and children are much less likely to wear helmets unless compelled. required helmet use in cycling sport. Historically, road cycling regulations set by the sport's ruling body, Union Cycliste Internationale, did not require helmet use, leaving the matter to individual preferences and local traffic laws. The majority of professional cyclists chose not to wear helmets, citing discomfort and claiming that helmet weight would put them in a disadvantage during uphill sections of the race. The first serious attempt by the UCI to introduce compulsory helmet use in 1991 was met with strong opposition from the riders. An attempt to enforce the rule at the 1991 Paris-Nice race resulted in a riders' strike, forcing the UCI to abandon the idea. While voluntary helmet use in professional ranks rose somewhat in the 1990s, the turning point in helmet policy was the March 2003 death of Kazakh Andrei Kivalev. The new rules were introduced on 5 May 2003, with the 2003 Giro d'Italia being the first major race affected. The 2003 rules allowed for discarding the helmets during final climbs of at least 5 kilometers in length. Subsequent revisions made helmet use mandatory at all times. Cycling risk and head injury. In the USA, 2/3 of cyclists admitted to hospital have a head injury. 90% of cyclist deaths are caused by collisions with motor vehicles. For cyclists admitted to hospital in Western Australia before the helmet law, about 30% of cyclists and 30% of pedestrians had head injuries. Trends and proportions of cyclists admitted to hospital with head injury were similar for all road users. Comparison to other modes of transportation. An article by Roger Ford in Informed Sources, and a paper by Malcolm Wardlaw, reported that measured per hour, the risk of driving, cycling and walking are similar. A 2010 study by Tintin et al. At the School of Population Health at the University of Auckland found that in New Zealand the average number of serious injuries per million hours spent travelling in 2003-07 was 6.2 for cyclists, 1.0 for pedestrians, and 0.8 for car van drivers. This study was based on data from New Zealand, and the authors point out that our findings indicate that cyclists are likely to be at greater risk when travelling in the road environment of auto-centric countries like New Zealand. Effectiveness. Meta-analyses. There are several meta-analyses and reviews which synthesize and evaluate the results of multiple case control studies. A 1999 Cochrane review of case control studies of bicycle helmets by Thompson et al., a team funded by the helmet industry, said that helmets provide a 63 to 88% reduction in the risk of head, brain and severe brain injury for all ages of bicyclists. Helmets provide equal levels of protection for crashes involving motor vehicles and crashes from all other causes. Injuries to the upper and mid-facial areas are reduced 65%. A 2001 meta-analysis commissioned by the Australian government said that there was overwhelming evidence in support of helmets for preventing head injury and fatal injury. A 2012 reanalysis by Elvik concluded that the 2001 meta-analysis was influenced by publication bias and time trend bias that was not controlled for. As a result, the analysis reported inflated estimates of the effects of bicycle helmets. Elvik writes, when the risk of injury to head, face or neck is viewed as a whole, bicycle helmets do provide a small protective effect. This effect is evident only in older studies. New studies, summarized by a random effects model of analysis, indicate no net protective effect. As a result of a challenge to the accuracy of the meta-analysis, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration removed the language, up to 85% effective, from the website. They also reworded the website to read, "Bicycle helmets are the single most effective piece of equipment to reduce head injuries in the event of a crash." Health benefits of cycling. Studies from China, Denmark, the Netherlands and the United Kingdom show that regular cyclists live longer because the health effects far outweigh the risk of crashes. A reduction in the number of cyclists is likely to harm the health of the population more than any possible protection from injury. UK figures show that it takes at least 8,000 years of average cycling to produce one clinically severe head injury and 22,000 years for one death. De Jong developed a mathematical model to evaluate the health-risk trade-offs of all age mandatory helmet laws. If they were to be introduced in various North American and Western European countries, he concluded that helmet laws appear to offer net health benefit only in those countries with more dangerous bicycling environments under optimistic assumptions of the efficacy of helmets. Newbold suggested improvements to the De Jong model, and, using published cycling statistics for the United States in his revised model, found that mandatory bicycle helmet laws would seem to have positive net public health benefits there. However, Newbold stressed that there were many parameters to these models which require further research to properly quantitate, and that results should be considered provisional rather than definitive. Some researchers have suggested that illegal requirement to wear helmets may have dissuaded people from cycling, and that repeal of these laws could lead to increased cycling. This suggestion has been criticized. Fewer cyclists might lead to increased risks per cyclist due to the "safety in numbers" effect. According to one source, the probability of an individual cyclist being struck by a motorist declines with the 0.6 power of the number of cyclists on the road. This means that if the number of cyclists on the road doubles, then the average individual cyclist can ride for an additional 50% of the time without increasing the probability of being struck. It is thought that the increased frequency of motorist-cyclist interaction creates more aware motorists. Risk compensation. It has been hypothesized that the wearing of helmets may make cyclists feel safer and thus take more risks. This hypothetical effect is known as risk compensation or risk homeostasis. Some authors have suggested that risk compensation occurs with other road safety interventions such as seat belts and anti-lock braking systems, but these views are disputed by other road safety experts. A Spanish study of traffic accidents between 1990 and 1999 found that helmeted cyclists involved in accidents were less likely to have committed a traffic law violation than unhelmeted cyclists, and that helmeted cyclists were no more likely to have committed a speeding violation in association with the accident than unhelmeted cyclists. The authors concluded that, although the findings do not support the existence of a strong risk compensation mechanism among helmeted cyclists, this possibility cannot be ruled out. In one experimental study, adults accustomed to wearing helmets cycled more slowly without a helmet, but no difference in helmeted and unhelmeted cycling speed was found for cyclists who do not usually wear helmets. An experimental study found that children negotiating an obstacle course on foot went faster and took more risks when wearing safety gear. A telephone interview study found that in hypothetical scenarios of the children wearing protective equipment and not, parents' ratings of permissible risk for the children was higher if protective gear was hypothetically worn. Motorists may also alter the behavior toward helmeted cyclists. One study by Walker in England found that 2,500 vehicles passed a helmeted cyclist with measurably less clearance than that given to the same cyclist unhelmeted. The significance of these differences has been reanalyzed by Olivier, is described above. In 1988, Rogers reanalyzed data which supposedly showed helmets to be effective. He found data errors and methodological weaknesses, and concluded that in fact the data showed bicycle-related fatalities are positively and significantly associated with increased helmet use. He mentioned risk compensation as one possible explanation of this association. Accidental hanging by helmet straps. There are cases of young children playing suffering death of severe brain damage as a result of hanging by the straps of the bicycle helmets. European Standard N1080, which uses a weak retention system designed to open under load, was published in 1997 to address this problem. Such helmets are not intended for use anywhere motor vehicles are present. To avoid serious accidents, parents and carers should take care to ensure that children do not wear bicycle helmets during unsupervised play, or when using climbing equipment. Opinions for and against the compulsion. A strong promotion of helmets. Supporters. Significant helmet promotion preceded epidemiological studies evaluating the effectiveness of bicycle helmets in bicycle crashes. Received opinion in some English-speaking countries is that bicycle helmets are useful and that every cyclist should wear one. Helmets had become a bomb and apple pie issue in the United States by 1991, according to the League of American Bicyclists. The National Health Service of the United Kingdom lists wearing a helmet as one of its cycling safety tips for beginners and states wearing a cycling helmet can help prevent a head injury if you fall from your bike. The American Medical Association Medical Student section has stated that helmet use is an effective public health intervention. A number of cycling advocacy organizations support helmet use legislation. The League of American Bicyclists has encouraged the wearing of helmets via its publications and its education program for many years. Since 1991, the League has required participants in League-sponsored events to wear helmets. Cycling Advocates Network, a nationwide New Zealand cycling advocacy group, fully supports the use of helmets when undertaking recreational cycling in difficult terrain or high-speed competitive racing. Bicycle Network, Australia's largest bike riding organisation, supports the helmet legislation. Bicycle Queensland supports helmet laws, noting that ample research shows the safety benefits of wearing helmets surpasses the no-helmet personal freedom argument. Numerous health medical groups support helmet laws. These include the World Health Organization, the British Medical Association, the American Medical Association, the American College of Emergency Physicians, the Canadian Pediatric Society, the Canadian Academy of Sport and Exercise Medicine, and the Royal Australasian College of Surgeons, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents recommend wearing helmets. Safety groups Safe Kids USA and the National Safety Council urge helmet wearing. SWOV recommends helmet use. Temple University's Public Health Law Research Program classifies bicycle helmets laws as an effective public health intervention, based on a review of scholarly research. The British National Children's Bureau supports and promotes helmet use. Opponents. Dorothy Robinson reviewed data from jurisdictions where helmet use increased following legislation, and concluded that helmet laws did not demonstrably reduce cyclists' head injuries. Mayor Hillman, a transport and road safety analyst from the UK, does not support the use of helmets, reasoning that they are of very limited value in the event of a collision with a car, that risk compensation negates the protective effect, and because he feels the promotion implicitly shifts responsibility of care to the cyclist. He also cautions against placing the recommendations of surgeons above other expert opinion in the debate, comparing it to drawing conclusions on whether it is worthwhile to buy lottery tickets by sampling only a group of prize winners. The prominent UK-based cycling activist John Franklin is skeptical of the merits of helmets, regarding proactive measures including bike maintenance and riding skills as being more important. Cyclists' representative groups complain that focus on helmets diverts attention from other issues which are much more important for improving bicycle safety, such as road danger reduction, training, roadcraft, and bicycle maintenance. In 1998, the European Cyclists Federation adopted a position paper rejecting compulsory helmet laws as being likely to have greater negative rather than positive health effects. The UK's largest cyclists organisation, Cycling UK, believes that the overall health effects of compulsory helmets are negative. The Dutch Fietsbond summarised existing evidence and concluded that compulsory helmet law would have a negative impact on population health. Helmet laws save a few brains but destroy a lot of hearts. No policy position was provided for other types of cycling, particular mountain biking and all forms of on- and off-road cycle sports. In March 2013, Malcolm Wardlaw was reported by The Guardian saying that helmet compulsion should be challenged. It's sending out the wrong message about cycling being dangerous. It's as pernicious as saying smoking is safe. Legislation and culture. The following countries have mandatory helmet laws in at least one jurisdiction, for either minors only or for all riders: Australia, Canada, Czech Republic, Finland, Iceland, New Zealand, Sweden, and the United States. Spain requires helmets on interurban routes. In the US, 21 states have statewide mandatory helmet laws for minors of varying ages, and 37 states have mandatory helmet laws for varying age groups in varying jurisdictions. Nearly 9 in 10 American adults support helmet laws for children. Israel's helmet law was never enforced or obeyed, and the adult element has been revoked. Mexico City has repealed its helmet law. In 2004, a bill proposing to make the wearing of bicycle helmets compulsory came before the UK Parliament and was defeated. Horton observed. The 2004 parliamentary bill was unanimously opposed by the cycling establishment, with every major cycling organisation and magazine rejecting helmet compulsion. A 2016 Irish postage stamp originally depicting a cyclist with helmet and high-vis vest was altered to remove those after Cycling Ireland complained that it would discourage people from taking up cycling. Although the link is not causal, it is observed that the countries with the best cycle safety records have among the lowest levels of helmet use. The bicycle safety record is generally attributed to public awareness and understanding of cyclists' safety in numbers, education, and cycling infrastructure. A study of cycling in major streets of Boston, Paris, and Amsterdam illustrates the variation in cycling culture. Boston had far higher rates of helmet wearing. Amsterdam had far more cyclists. Cycle helmet wearing rates in the Netherlands and Denmark are very low. An Australian journalist writes, "Rarities in Amsterdam seem to be stretch fabric-clad cyclists and fat cyclists. Helmets are non-existent, and when people asked me where I was from, they would grimace and mutter, 'Ah, yes, helmet laws.'" These had gained international notoriety on a par with our deadly sea animals. Despite the lack of helmets, cycling in the Netherlands is safer than in any other country, and the Dutch have 1/3 the number of cycling fatalities that Australia has. Cycling UK say that cycling in the Netherlands and Denmark is perceived as a normal activity requiring no special clothing or equipment. Puka and Bella state The Dutch cycling experts and planners interviewed for this paper adamantly opposed the use of helmets, claiming that helmets discourage cycling by making it less convenient, less comfortable, and less fashionable. They also mention the possibility that helmets would make cycling more dangerous by giving cyclists a false sense of safety and thus encouraging riskier riding behavior.